Hello and welcome to the inaugural edition of the Mainstream Media Podcast, hosted at Raw News, King's College London's student newspaper.
Today, we talk to members of the Lib Dem, Labour and Conservative Party, and with some of our staff writers to give their opinion on the news and where we're going to go for the next 2 years. My name is Fintan Hogan, and we hope you enjoy. We've got 3 partisans on, intended. 2 of them managed to make it to the recording studio, and unfortunately, our Conservative representative was taken sick. He has, however, sent in some answers to questions, which we'll be reading and discussing later on in the show. I'd like to introduce you to my team of staff writers here who are offering comment on all of the day's events. First, we have Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm a staff writer here at Raw, and I'm also a member of the Labour Party.
I'm Fred. I'm a staff writer here at Raw.
Hi, I'm Daisy. I'm a staff writer here at Raw, and I'm not a member of any party, but probably more left-wing.
And I'm here with Gabriel now, who is a member of King's College London's Lib Dem Society. Gabriel, thanks for coming along.
What's up, man? How's it going?
Yeah, well, tumultuous, I think is the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Politics, and I think, what's this been like for you as a third party?
What as a third-party student of a
Yes.
society? Pretty normal, honestly. You know, watch the news. It's basically a TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has been since 2016 in so many ways. What's the perception? I presume you've been to at least talking to Lib Dem members at the moment. What's the perception of what's happened to the Conservative Party?
Well, you know what? I can give you something even better than that.
Oh, wow.
I can give you what the voters think because I've been canvassing in a council by-election. I canvassed for about 10 hours over the weekend. Did about 15 kilometres just showing
We're
off.
recording on Tuesday now, just for, yeah.
We are. But yeah. And basically, so we were in a ward in an area called Kingston, which is usually Lib Dem versus Conservative. And right now, it's just us versus this independent group. And the independent group are incredibly right-wing, right? But what you're seeing is a lot of Conservative voters, because the Conservatives are now seen as so untrustworthy, they don't know where to go. So they don't know whether to go to someone like us or even Labour or something like this independent group that's perhaps to the sort of deeper urges of some of exactly. So the unpopularity created by the fallout of what's been happening to the Conservative Party has really pushed people in all different directions. At the same time, a lot of people I was talking to were also discussing how this has made them lose faith in all of politics, because people. The thing is, all of us here are like way too into this and need to sort of get out more, right? And to the people that, exactly, and people that do actually get out more, it all sort of blurs. They're but for them, it all sort of blurs together, right? So they just get this general impression that the people on telly are untrustworthy. And that's a pretty fair impression to make if you're watching the news for an hour a week. Yeah. So a lot of them, aren't thinking of voting. I mean, it's a local election, but I mean not voting
how come
at all.
the by-election's been called? Like, what's the context?
Oh, a Lib Dem councillor found a job 6 months after getting elected and moved out of the community. Yeah, it's a shame. But we've got a great candidate. I don't think we're here for that though. But
you're happy to pitch away if you want.
Mahmood Rafiq he's just fantastic. He's a lovely man. Gave me a lift to the station. I talked to an old lady on the doorstep, and she had no idea who I was talking about. I showed him the picture on the calling card, and she was like, "I met that man 8 months ago, and he helped me walk through a park when I was feeling a bit dizzy." Right, and he was just looking at the river. He was just enjoying nature because we're environmentalists at heart. Yeah, he's just a lovely man.
Well, from the anecdotes of the third party by-election, towards what do you think so people are disillusioned with the Conservative Party right now. There's been a huge swing away from them, at least in your anecdotal experience in Kingston. Do you think this is recoverable for the Conservatives under Sunak?
Oh, yeah. Oh, under Sunak, though?
Under Sunak.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Like specifically in the next 2-3 years?
No.
You're producing a wipeout?
Yeah.
1997?
Well, I mean, I've done some analysis myself. That's part of the things I do, and some polls show the Conservatives on 30 seats. Yeah. Those polls aren't reputable, though. Ignore those. The best polling company is a company called Survation, and they have it a bit more generous, but they only have them on like 80. Yeah. This isn't like Rishi Sunak comes out and says, you know what we're going to do? We're going to cut benefits now, and everyone's going to go, well, hey, back on the gravy train. That's not going to happen, man.
I guess counter argument is that this is a complete nadir for the Conservatives. We're never going to get an election at the nadir. I was interviewing someone today and they said Turkeys are never going to vote for Christmas. Like, the Conservatives has no chance of them calling an election.
Yeah.
there's a fair argument that over the next 2 years he does regain some of the popularity. People are fickle. Like, they forgot Johnson. I mean, half the Conservative Party forgot what Johnson did in about 6 weeks with Truss. Aren't people going to just turn around and vote blue at the next election?
I see what you mean. So the difference from 1997 is now we have a much more ingrained 24-hour news cycle, and that means that, like you said, people are going to slowly forget events that happen like that. But the polling swing that would be required is nothing that has ever been seen in political history one time. It's the worst polling for the Conservative Party since 1996.
Yeah. I think she was their least popular and shortest
Exactly.
serving leader, which is quite the CV.
Amazing. And before that, it was their worst since, but this is perhaps in favour of your point, the worst since, I believe, 1982, one of those. Yeah, but that's when the SDP were on like 50% in the polls, and the Conservatives were way down, and then the Falklands War happened. So, if there's something big that goes on, then yeah, people might, want stability, want someone who they've seen.
Some opportunity for Sunak to be like a proper statesman, I guess, is the only thing.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, fair enough. And you think if this predicted wipeout does come to pass, do you think Lib Dems have any chance of capitalising on that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So as you know, I'm a Lib Dem, and therefore I think the electoral system doesn't work.
Yes.
But it works when the Conservatives are losing, because almost all of our marginals are Conservative marginals. We have very few with Labour. So when the Conservatives are down, we can lose like half our vote and double the amount of seats we have, to the point where I think Opinium did an analysis that we get 39 seats at the next election, and right now on 13, 14. Yeah. So yeah, no, we're loving it. I mean, we're not loving the country being absolute tatters, but cynically, the Lib Dems having more seats is a good thing.
Yeah.
I
don't know what else there is really to ask.
That's
Have any of you guys got any questions, specifically Lib Dem related?
Why do you think the Lib Dems are a better alternative than Labour or the Greens?
Lib Dems are a better alternative. Well, okay, there's two steps to that. So with Labour, essentially, this is how I sort of view all party politics. We all have very similar goals, which is to create sort of the best society we have possible. Us and Labour have a very similar society at the end, but the way we get there is very different. So, for example, we're more a bottom-up approach, so more about more power to local government, federalisation, even things like a universal basic income is sort of a signifier of that, less of sort of a top-down approach to organising society to sort of optimal efficiency, optimal equality. We want people to have barriers removed from them so that they can succeed. And that would include things that Labour also cares about, so like racial discrimination, discrimination of sexual orientation, all of that bad stuff. But that's the difference, is that our philosophy to do it is just different. And at the same time, we've got a longer history of pro-environmentalism. We're the only party that wants to drop the number of nuclear weapons, for example. If you look at our manifestos, there's just a whole lot of things you can tick, being like, that's not there, that's not there, that's not there. And then with the Greens, I mean, have you ever read a Green Party manifesto?
It's fairly radical, I would say.
Radical is, let's stick with that word. The Greens are far more radical than people even really notice. So I heard a story of someone that attended a Green Party meeting in the 1980s, which is when it was the Ecology Party. And that's when they were still talking about their ideas as communes and Soviets.
Wow.
Yeah, they want full-scale
economic... It's not the Green Party of today, though, to be fair.
Well, they in their latest manifesto, they want full-scale economic planning to achieve either zero or negative growth.
Okay, so the anti-growth coalition.
That's the funny thing. But the thing is, they'd argue that growth isn't sustainable. Maybe levels of growth we've had now aren't sustainable, so that's a point. But their solution to that is to stop growth and for living standards to keep improving, to completely redistribute. Now, that might work in what you call like a closed system, but in an open system where companies can leave, that's not going to work.
I'm not an economist. I wouldn't.
Oh, neither am I. But you say it with enough confidence.
One last question, just because I'm aware that we're not using your time. You have emphasised your differences with both Labour and the Greens, but I presume you would still be in favour of some sort of implicit electoral pact at the next election. Say, okay, obviously at the moment the polls say that Tories are going to be wiped out, but if it came, say it was 20 points instead of 30 points, I presume you'd be in favour of some sort of nudge and a wink with the Labour Party as who competes well.
I'm in favour of Lib Dem policies becoming law in any way, really. Well, not in any way. There's some pretty big caveats on that.
So
but
yes, you'd be in favour.
I'm in favour of Lib Dem policies becoming a real thing.
And you would go into coalition with Labour.
You didn't say coalition. You said.
Would you go into coalition?
Well, I don't think I'm in charge of that, mate.
Would you?
Would I
Gabriel-
personally? No, but I think no. I think a bigger level of distance would be necessary. Plus, that wouldn't really destabilise the government because Labour would have other parties on the centre left they could talk to. I think going into a formalised coalition would, just like in 2010, make us appear as if we've just sort of been amalgamated.
Supplying confidence.
Exactly. So when I don't know if you've ever heard it, but when Lib Dems talk about things that we did during the coalition, no one really listens or pays attention because
The
it's
good
just
things with the Tories and the bad things with the
exactly.
Liberals.
We don't want that to happen again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, you had one last question.
That was exactly my question.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Go on.
Mine was just, how do you feel about the problem of like tactical voting? Because obviously, if the Conservatives are predicted to make such a massive loss, the one thing that everyone kind of attributes to the fact that Lib Dems haven't maybe succeeded in getting into a government of their own is because tactical voting makes you choose either Conservative or Labour. And I was wondering whether you think it will either be whether that the Conservatives not doing so well this time round will prove well for Lib Dems, or whether it will prove even better for Labour because people will tactically vote Labour to push the Tories out because they're so widely seen negatively. I was just wondering how you, as a member of the Lib Dems, feel about that.
Almost will Lib Dems suffer for people going too far and going Starmer?
Yeah. So historically, when the Conservative vote goes down, even if our vote doesn't go up, our seats skyrocket. So, for example, in 1997, I think we went from about 25 to 44, and our vote did not increase. Or at least I think it might have done by about 0.5%.
Right.
And that's partly due to tactical voting, and it's also just because people aren't voting Conservative anymore. Even if they're switching to Labour in that constituency, we still win. And even if they're not voting, which is actually a lot more common when that kind of thing happens, we still win. So yeah, no, it'll go well.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering because that's obviously the main thing, isn't it? So,
Yeah, sure. I mean, and also, we're the party that's strongest for electoral reform as well. So if there was a system where that didn't have to happen, that would be great.
Well, one last question I've just thought of off the hoof. I'm going to ask all three of you prediction for general election 2024. Prediction for the outcome.
Can you ask them first? Because I'm going to do some
I'm
maths in my
afraid
head.
first on the first
Oh,
on the
okay.
board.
Okay, Labour majority of 80.
80. Okay. Perfect. Lib Dems winning a monumental.
Lib Dems winning between 30 and 40 seats.
Would you be happy with that?
Yeah. Mate, a couple of years ago, we looked like dead in the water. Now we're back at it.
Yeah. The Lib Dem resurgence is on.
Yeah.
Gabriel, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
And welcome Paul, who's a member of King's Labour Party.
Hello.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, we know Paul from the debate, which we were lucky enough to attend. Paul was one of the Labour members and put in a good performance. How did that go for you?
No, I mean, I think it went all right. I think we had a very good team, and that it helped that Lewis and I had prepared quite a lot beforehand, and we get along very well. So, I mean, yeah, I think it went pretty well.
Yeah. Well, we invited you on today. Well, we invited you on when we had a different prime minister, but things changed.
Yeah.
And we'd just like you to know. The podcast was originally planned to be about the future of the Conservative Party, and that future looks a little bit more determined now, which means that hopefully the podcast will date a bit better. But we'd like to know what you think of the Labour Party's position, Keir Starmer's leadership, first and foremost.
So, like, kind of generally, or like...
generally, where the Labour Party are now, are you happy with it?
Well, personally,
Personally, yeah.
I think it's in. I like Keir Starmer's politics. I think that he's kind of, and I think he's relatively in tune with where the country's at. What I think he's struggling with a little bit is that, and I think that it'd be nice if he kind of went out and said this more, is so I mean he's got like lots of really big ideas about kind of like what he wants to see about the green economy, etc. And it's really nice and it sounds really good, but it's also basically going to be unachievable in like the near future because I mean like everything's going on. Yeah, exactly. So and frankly, the responses Labour have given to what they're going to do like right now. Not that strong in my view. I think we should be talking a bit more about taxation. As it stands, like Labour's still committed to keeping the national insurance rise down and also to cutting income tax. Not sure how that's going to be possible at the moment. So that's the kind of stuff that I think that Labour should be focusing more on and develop their ideas a little bit more on. But I mean, aside from the kind of the broad emphasis and the broad ideas and the kind of going fully into the green economy stuff, I really like that.
Yeah, and you couldn't be more happy with polling results, right?
I mean, yeah, yeah, it definitely looks good for us.
So yeah, where are you now? Like 30 points?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like there was polls that came near 40%. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, but that's going to go down, to be honest.
Yeah,
That's
of
not
course.
like-
They're at the nadir at the moment, and they'll obviously come to it. You're involved quite a lot in your local Labour Party, right? And
Yeah.
Would you tell us a bit more about that and where you've stood in the past?
So I was a council candidate earlier this year. So I mean, my background's a bit weird because I came from Brussels. So I only joined the Labour Party quite late, just because I didn't have a British bank account, so you can't join a party if you don't have one.
Mhm.
So when I finally joined, pretty quickly actually, I was just pretty heavily involved, just going canvassing a lot. I went canvassing a lot in the West End, just because it was near mine, and then I made friends with those guys, and they helped me get the council candidate role, and then I stood in St James, which is actually the constituency the Strand campus is in, so that's
Right.
cool. Also Downing Street, which is quite fun. But yeah, and well, I mean, I lost that because I mean it's a ward. I mean, like it's an unwinnable, very strongly Tory ward. But I mean, actually the results are pretty good. And
Well, how old are you?
I'm 19.
And already standing in Labour
Well,
councillor.
yeah.
It's very. I presume that the mood in your party meetings is very positive.
Oh,
As
God,
much
yeah.
at the state of the Conservative Party.
I mean, so if you want, the thing is, there's a like the constituency Labour Party meetings are a bit it's a very weird constituency, but certainly the kind of
What's the name of the constituency?
so the constituency is cities of London and Westminster,
Cool.
and so there's a difference between that and also like Westminster Labour more broadly, which includes parts of Westminster North.
Okay.
And that's where that's the council, and Westminster North is like a strong Labour seat, and I mean it's been Labour since '97, and that's that. It's got cities of London, or two cities, is really, it's a very fractious. It's a bit of a fractious CLP. I mean, like I get along with basically everybody there, but I mean it's true that there are people who don't get along, and I mean the atmosphere is a bit weird. But in general, though, people were very happy with the results on election day.
I know. What's the perception of the Conservative Party? Are you, I guess, optimistic, or are you? I wouldn't say complacent. Do you assume that it's going to stay on this way, or is there a sense of realism? Like I think Keir Starmer's trying to get across more that actually act like you're only 3 points ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Tomorrow it could.
Oh yeah, I mean there are two objectively speaking, the Conservatives don't have to call an election for another 2 years. I mean,
And they probably won't.
yeah, they probably won't, and I mean, fair enough, to be honest. I mean, if I had that majority, I mean, I wouldn't give it up like that. So no, I mean, in practice, the polls will definitely go down at some point. Keir will definitely come up with problems. Rishi's not an idiot, so I mean, he shouldn't be completely screwing up the economy so badly that the Tories will be leading by, the Labour will be leading by 30% in 2 years. So no, we definitely shouldn't be complacent. And I mean, yeah, we might still lose this, like honestly.
Yeah, you think?
Oh, I mean, look, it looks unlikely now, but genuinely, like, a lot can happen in 2 years. I don't know, obviously, like, I mean, I think about like French politics, about how quickly things can change in 2 years. I mean, 2 years ago, actually, no, to be honest, if you look 2 years ago, like in 2020, people were thinking the Labour Party was never going to win again. And I mean, like now we're 30 points ahead. So I mean, like, this stuff changes way too quickly for anybody to predict.
And I was going to ask at the end, but you've kind of segued yourself into it. For 2024, if you had to make a prediction now, which you do, what would you suggest? We're going to look back at this in 2 years.
I really don't like making predictions, to be honest, because I think that it's always this kind of thing where like people kind of rationalize it ex post if they get it wrong, and they're just like, actually, I did see it coming, but I mean, I got it wrong because of this. So no, I really don't know. It looks like a small Labour for me. I feel like a small Labour majority. I think we can hope for that. I think at least a small Labour majority seems
Looking at the
fair
polling,
enough.
you'd have to suggest
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the polling right now, we're getting like 500 seats, but that's not
Of course,
happening.
I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting you be triumphalist about it.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, like right now, it does look like a Labour majority. Yeah.
So Sunak's been, just today actually, has been appointed as Conservative leader. What do you think? Like, are you? The last three was kind of Johnson more than Sunak. Are you happy with the choice that Conservative got? Like, in terms of pure cynical political choice, who would you?
Oh,
Sunak?
Cynical political choice.
Yes.
I think Boris would have been a better candidate for Labour.
Yeah.
I think that I think that he's going to come up because I mean, like, frankly, there's a good chance that he's going to be like kicked out of the House of Commons in the next few months. I mean, like the fact like having another Conservative leader resign within like 3 months of being elected again, that's beyond comprehension. I'm not sure how they'll ever recover from that.
Yeah.
So
Bad optics.
Yeah, it's not great. So I think Boris would have, and I mean, even if he doesn't get banned, which is, to be honest, it's also relatively likely. But even if he doesn't, like, I mean, he would still be spending a good chunk of this winter, like, in hearings about this in the Privileges Committee, I think that's what it's called. Yeah. So yeah, he'd be spending most of his winter doing that, and I mean, it is a cost of living crisis that can't look good. So I think purely cynically and from Labour's perspective, I think Johnson probably could have, like, I mean, I think it would have looked good for us, to be honest.
But for the country Starmers.
Sorry?
But for the country Starmer. But for the country Sunak is the right
Oh,
choice.
I mean, I think so, yeah.
Well, I'm sure you think Starmer
Well,
is
yeah.
the right choice.
Well, yeah, of course.
But Sunak on for 3.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, to be fair, I don't know what Morden's politics actually are, which is, to be fair, I think that's kind of the big thing with Morden, is that she's kind of like, oh, what does she actually stand for or believe in? But
that's what to be fair, I was saying to someone the other day that normally that's a terrible thing going into a leadership election, but I wondered if the Conservatives might opt for her, just because being a blank slate at this point is a good thing, because anything not in the record, but it's kind of, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter now it's done, but I mean, I think, well, I mean, it's also, I think, like, right now, I think, especially if you look at, like, the financial markets and everything, they seem to be really banking on, like, someone stable and a sure just choice, and everybody knew that that everyone, like, these guys were in favour of Rishi. I think it wouldn't really have helped if we had another, like, unknown quantity there that we wouldn't really have been able to place.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's also relatively unpopular with certain elements of the Conservative Party in a way that I'm not sure Rishi is.
Yeah. So might unite the Conservatives, increase their polling.
Yeah, I mean, definitely increase their polling. Yeah, because I just don't think that he's definitely a better communicator than Liz Truss is. But I mean, he's going to struggle. I think that a lot of the divisions in the Conservative Party are probably going to last and are probably more structural than anything else. He's not going to fix that, I think, in the next 2 years.
And he's received a lot of praise from most courses generally over the last. But where are the weaknesses that you think the Labour Party should really be pointing at? Is it his track record? Is it his delivery? Is it his background, I guess some people would say?
Well, I mean, to be honest, just the thing is, we all love to, like, I mean, what he's very successfully done is kind of present himself as a whole, like, oh yeah, he's replacing Johnson, he's bringing integrity back to the Conservative Party. The guy was in the government for like 2 years. He knew everything that was going on. He was there at some of the parties. He's also been fined. Like, I mean, at some point, he's got, well, basically anything,
he's got an
like,
FPN as well, right?
yeah, exactly. I mean, the stuff that you can say about Johnson, you can basically say all of them. Well, I wouldn't actually go that far. No, maybe not all of them. But to be fair, like, I mean,
He's implicated,
yeah, he's implicated. I'm not sure he can get out of it that quickly. I mean, I think, yeah, a lot of what you can say about the kind of the lack of leadership under Johnson, I think he kind of enabled the misleading Parliament that happened under Johnson. Again, he was the Chancellor. He was the main guy that Johnson sent out whenever he needed someone to do interviews for him. Like, he's kind of he's definitely implicated in basically. Yeah, he was. Yeah.
And just finally, is probably the last thing I'm going to ask you. If you were in charge of Labour's marketeering for the next 2 years, what 3 words would you try and hammer into the Conservative reputation? How would you try and define your opposition before the next election? Just 3 words.
Well, incompetent.
Incompetent.
Divided isn't a good one.
Yeah.
And probably just, I think nasty is the nice one that always kind of, it always rings quite well with the Conservatives, especially like with what they're going to have to do now, I think.
Incompetent, nasty, divided. Well, Labour have got their chance then, if you manage to message that.
Yeah.
Do any of you 3 have a question?
I've got one now. There is a £40 billion hole in our budget. We have serious economic constraints. Labour has many good policies. I think we could consider them to be positive, but how do they differentiate themselves from the Conservatives given the economic reality?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we were saying at the start. I think it's where Labour's, frankly, I think they're struggling a bit, and I think it's because the thing is, there's always a dilemma with Labour, I think, which is that they need to, on one hand, they don't want to be portrayed as the party of tax and spend, which is like always a vote loser, but on the other hand, they also want to do more public spending, right? So I don't know, the fundamental, I'm not really sure what's the way out of that politically. I definitely agree with you that there needs to be like more thought. I personally think that there should be considering stuff like wealth taxes and that they should start like committing to those things. I think that and that there'd be a way out of the problems that you were suggesting. But I mean, it's true that right now it's true that Rachel Reeves has gone on and said like, oh yeah, like we really care about fiscal discipline, and you're kind of like, okay, but what are you going to do? And I don't really know, to be honest.
I did actually, just thinking about what Gabriel was talking to us about just before the Lib Dem, how he talks about what differentiates the Lib Dems from Labour in a positive sense, what differentiates Labour from why should dissatisfied Conservative voters switch all the way from Tories to Labour and not stop somewhere along the line at the Lib Dems?
Why? Well, to be honest, I think so. The Lib Dems try to portray themselves as a kind of middle of the road option. I think in practice there tends to be kind of a they kind of try to do like what's like so. I mean, they'll argue that they try to do what's good about both. I think in practice they just either end up doing one or the other. In practice, so I mean, like and I think I brought this up in the debate at some point, but I mean it's very like you'll get pretty wild shifts. So like I mean in 2010 they backed quite a lot of like they were like definitely on a pretty strong austerity footing, but they were also thinking about more spending on the NHS, and I mean like that doesn't make sense. Like at some point, like I mean it's just you're gonna have these difficult choices to make, and I think if you want to do more public spending, you're gonna have to want to increase taxes. And I think that in general the Lib Dems don't like doing that, and that's where they consider themselves to be kind of different from the Tories. But I mean, yeah, I don't know.
You have the track record.
Yeah.
And just finally, last question, if there's none others. Would you go into coalition with the Lib Dems or the SNP at the next election if Paul Spence was leader of the Labour Party?
SNP, no. I mean, like politically, the optics would be awful. Also, I mean,
Optics and the real consequences.
Yeah, and the real consequences. Yeah, I mean, it's very real chance we'd break up the UK. Lib Dems. I mean, again, I think in general, the idea of a coalition probably doesn't sound great in the UK. So it's not something that you should. I think that Keir Starmer's been like it's a good thing that he hasn't gone out and said like, yeah, I'd be prepared to do this, just because like I don't think it's a good idea. But I mean, like, yeah, definitely consider it. Like, I mean, certainly, especially like the Lib Dems as it stands now, like they agree with Labour on virtually everything.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's all. Paul, thank you for coming on and for your time. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, Isaac Fairbank, who was meant to come up as our Conservative representative, has been taken ill, and we wish Isaac all the best in his recovery. He wasn't able to attend today, but he's very kindly answered some questions which I sent him. So before we start our group discussion with our lovely staff writers, I would like to just read out my questions and his answers to those. So first I asked him why Rishi Sunak was the right choice for Prime Minister. And his answer was that fundamentally, Sunak was the only candidate who commanded a credible majority of Tory MPs from all wings of the party. The party spent months talking to ourselves and indulging in psychodrama, so having a leader who can stand a fighting chance of uniting the party and delivering stable government is essential, both for the country and for the Conservatives. My second question was, do the Conservatives have a chance at the next general election? He said it's certainly going to be an uphill struggle, but look, the party is one of the most electorally successful in the world. If we continue to properly resolve the many issues facing the country, unite and don't retreat into decline management, we can win the next election. Whilst on the subject, many Conservatives feel a period in opposition may actually benefit the party over the long term. Finally, I asked him, has the party damaged their reputation for stability and economic credibility beyond all repair? He told me that no, it's always recoverable. After the 1980s recessions and Black Wednesday, Brexit and the like, the party has always bounced back. Certainly, it's been damaged significantly, and I think this is just as much about abandoning the mini-budget policies as it was of the policies themselves. If we'd stuck to the tax cuts and made spending cuts, we would have delivered higher growth in the medium term and been credited for this. Just as Thatcher's policies were unpopular but worked, so could Truss's had she funded the tax cuts through spending cuts. We are in the place we find ourselves today, however, and so the task is to restore stability and certainly the economy, which I'm confident which we will be achieved. Whether that's sufficient to restore our reputation as not just competent custodians of the economy, but also as a party that can deliver a stronger economy remains to be seen. We'd like to thank Isaac for these answers and once again wish him get well soon. Hello, Daisy, Fred and Ben. We're all sitting around the mic now ready to discuss what the three of you just heard from each of our party representatives. First and foremost, for all of you, I'd just like your impressions on Rishi Sunak, the man, the politician, the father, the rich businessman, the banker. Daisy, first, what do you think about him?
I don't know. I think out of the potential candidates, obviously, I think Boris Johnson would have been at the least undemocratic. I feel like Morden, you don't really know much about
the least. What do you mean least?
Least undemocratic.
The most democratic choice?
No, the most undemocratic choice.
Oh, okay. Because he just was deposed and reinstated.
Yeah, exactly. And Morden, I'm not really sure. I mean, you don't really know much about her policies. On one half, you'd argue, oh, that's a good fresh start. I think both Rishi and Boris have the downside of being attributed with the Partygate scandal and all of that kind of thing that happened back in the summer. But as for the country, I mean, facing the economic problems that we're facing right now, I think Rishi was probably the most sensible choice. Just party politics aside, country interest at heart, I think he's probably the best of the three options.
Fred?
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of striking like how little we know about Sunak's recent opinions, because since he lost the leadership election, he's been completely silent on everything, right? He never
To be
said
fair, it's
anything.
only been 6 weeks.
Yeah, 6 weeks. But his Twitter feed said nothing. He stayed away from the conference. So we don't really know what his approach to the current situation is in detail, as we would have known if he had set out a leadership campaign for a second time. But I think we kind of have to go off our perceptions of him and what he said in the last leadership election, which is that he's going to be someone who's not scared to make hard decisions. That's going to
Truss said that too, though.
no, he's not going to go in a too ideological direction. And if he is going to make ideological choices, he'll make them with more responsibility and when the economy's stabilised a lot more.
I think he's been shown to be pragmatic with, obviously, he's the COVID chancellor, right? He's the
Exactly.
He's the free, what was it, free meals? What was that scheme?
Oh, the 50% off.
Eat out to help.
Eat
Yeah,
out to help.
that's
He's
it,
the Eat
yeah.
out to help.
But I
That
think,
was a great policy,
yeah,
to be
it
fair.
it's very popular. But I think he has been very easily pushed when he was chancellor too. So is he just going to try to sway and keep public opinion on his side, or is he going to sort of like ruthlessly go through an austerity period? I think that's a hard thing to know at
Yeah,
this point.
interesting. Good question. Ben?
Yeah, I think the first thing we should all say, and sort of regardless of political viewpoints, I think it is a great achievement and something we should be proud of as a country, that we had our first South Asian prime minister, our first prime minister of colour, and I think that is I'm a firm believer in affirmative action, and I think it's great that a lot of people will be able to see him as a role model and see someone who does look like them in that kind of position of power. I think, of all the candidates that were available, Sunak is the safest pair of hands. I think he's going to be the most consistent. The pound has gone up to $1.15 now already. So the
It was
market,
as soon as Johnson announced he wasn't running, there was
Yeah.
a huge spike.
which is it's quite
tells you a lot.
that's quite a damning indictment of Johnson there. So yeah, I think this is going to be. I think it's going to still be tough times for people, but I think Sunak was the best one for the country and probably the best one for the Conservative Party.
Suella Braverman has just been appointed as Home Secretary.
This is a live news update.
Yeah.
Fred just told us that Suella is
6 days
home
after being-
sec.
Home Sec after 6 days after being sacked for security breach from Paul Brand.
That's
Yeah.
just
Oh,
amazing,
that's
that.
true. The context of which, well, it was pretty unclear whether she.
Mm.
was
How much
pushed
it
or
was a
whether she-
technicality and how much it was
Yeah.
a policy issue. So some people said it was something that people did quite often.
But if it
But-
really was a security breach and she's back 6 days later,
That-
so that's pretty
Shocking.
upsetting.
Longer
There's going to be
punishment.
questions about that, I think. But she did endorse Sunak and kind of won him some of the right for the party. So
Yeah,
And he may need her to sort of keep them on board.
Yeah.
Keep something that isn't sort of. I mean, it's hard to see whether his focus is going to be on keeping a strong economy and trying to not lose out there. But I think maybe keeping someone who's a bit has a radical sort of sense of immigration policy and
Yeah.
isn't afraid to sort of do some really extreme policies.
that's the thing. If
immigration
she's
can-
Home Secretary, the Rwanda plan's back on with more gusto than ever.
Yeah.
She said it was her dream to deport refugees. I don't know, like for no judgment, I think that it's like not from a position of judgment now, but I think that it is politically very likely that plan is going to receive
I think-
renewed emphasis after Priti Patel kind of got slightly dropped. This is her thing, right, Ben?
Yeah, to add to that as well, we've seen Dominic Raab is back with the Justice Brief, and of course last time he was in that position he was trying to get rid of the Human Rights Act and replace it with that so-called British Bill of Rights. Of course that was the only thing that was stopping the Rwanda plan the first time round, so maybe we could see that bit
Another one
push
is
forward.
Grant Shapps is the new business secretary, replacing Jacob Rees-Mogg, who resigned earlier today.
Well, Rees-Mogg he looked like he was on his way out as soon as he backed
Yeah.
Johnson so much. But
That's the problem, but yeah.
Boris or bust. So
Boris
Yeah.
Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah.
Perfect. So what do we think about Keir Starmer and the Labour Party then? In complete contrast, we've had such a period of redefinition from the Conservatives, and Starmer's just still there doing his thing. But I think the perception around him has changed. Fred, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it was a sort of notable that it wasn't just Truss going down, and it seemed to be that he was going up, and also that if Corbyn were there, I feel like the Conservative Party would have been very, they wouldn't have wanted to disunite, and they would have been far more open to like making policy changes and backing someone who wasn't the best candidate and uniting behind someone if the opposition was a fairly strong socialist instead of like a social democrat or like a more centrist.
There's no
candidate.
clear enemy to unite against.
Exactly, yeah. But
No, I would just say I think Keir Starmer is a good figurehead for Labour if they're going over, because obviously the next election isn't guaranteed until 2024. It's unlikely that the Tories are going to hold one. So I think for the next 2 years coming, I think Keir Starmer is a good symbol for the Labour Party in their opposition of the Conservatives, because he is stronger than Corbyn was in public opinion and in a lot of fields, I would argue. But I think he's a little bit more centre for a lot of the Tory voters who are potentially not willing to vote Tory but were more centre. He's an appealing candidate to switch to.
He's far more electable than Corbyn.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I mean,
as a Labour member.
yeah, well, yeah, I share these feelings, and looking back what Paul just said as well, there's what I think I'm going to call this sort of 1992 syndrome, in that the Labour Party looked very apprehensive about being confident about this. I think, you know, there was 30-point lead or something, and Paul would not say if they were going to win. I think that Sunak is the biggest threat that the Conservatives could have put forward. If anyone can brand what he's going to have to do, which is austerity, the best that will be Rishi. I think Labour seemed to be controlling the agenda a bit the past 6 months, which was what you have to do in opposition. You have to control the agenda. You have to be the agenda, and the policies were coming from them. And I think they need to now continue that and continue to push.
I would say, just from me, I think that Starmer was quite a potent antidote to what Johnson was, Johnson was a little bit of everything. He was bluster and bluff, I think, more than anything. That period's gone. Starmer is a details man, former barrister, Director of Public Prosecutions. He's a legalist at heart. I mean, your legalist credentials, your detailed credentials are far more important against a man I think he lied when he was a journalist and all sorts. So he's a man of no sort of attention to detail, whereas Sunak has the background in this. He was a former banker. Whatever you think of that profession, he can't be labelled in his public appearances. He is someone that has paid attention to detail. And I was listening to something just this morning about apparently when he was in the Chancellor role, he was such a big data head. He would get information from all different sources and try to reformulate his policies, yes, pragmatically, as we've discussed, but with an eye to detail, with an eye to comparison against other countries, with an eye to where he's been in the past. So I do think that we are definitely going to. It's not a bold prediction to say we're going to see a convergence in the polling, because there's no way that they can stay this far apart at the moment. But I do think that as a leader, Sunak is more or less Starmer, but with the eye of the public on him, because he's in number 10, right? Daisy, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that Sunak is an incredibly strong person to go up after the reputation, or after the last 6 months that the Tories have had. He's a very good choice to go in as Prime Minister tactically for them. But I would say for Starmer, who has previously, you know, it's been relatively easy for him to pick Boris apart because he was such a character, right? I would argue that potentially the choice of Braverman is an interesting one, because she doesn't have the reputation, I would say, that Rishi does, of being that strong, like, background of knowledge, very analytical. Her behaviour perhaps in the Commons has kind of proved that she is slightly more
pandering to the right of the party.
She's slightly more of a character type again. So it might be easier for Keir not to destabilise Sunak himself, but maybe to pick apart his cabinet. I mean, obviously we're about halfway through the reshuffle, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
We're mid reshuffle.
Yeah.
Now, so there might be more coming in from Fred, who's checking the news as we go. But Ben,
I would say that, you know, this is a cabinet system, and many people do vote off of the party leaders. But I think the quality of cabinet is something that will be considered, and I think that Yvette Cooper against Suella Braverman is one of the biggest mismatches out there, and she gets outclassed week in, week out, really. So I think that Labour can still put forward that more professional, and as long as they stay on top of their brief, they're going to be pushed more now. They certainly are, but I think they still need to continue to offer that different approach and stay on top of that
I
brief.
do wonder though if the Braverman issue is going to get that much airtime compared to, I mean, everything's dominated by number 10 Fred. So.
I just want to say that coming up is like so when in the brief period of time that the Truss was in government, she put forward the plan to scrap all EU law by the end of 2023. That bill's still present. Its second reading I think is due next week. And Jacob Rees-Mogg is a big fan. I think the ERG are like huge fans of this bill, and it doesn't seem the best bill if you're looking
It's
for
sovereignty, Fred. It's important.
it doesn't seem. It gives massive executive power. It doesn't seem like the best thing for economic stability and credibility. So, does he have to win them over by putting Braverman in the cabinet and being able to say, yeah, we'll stick to EU standards? Maybe that's a thing of saying.
Ben, you were shaking your head. Sorry. Is Sunak not the stability candidate? Where could he be undercut on
One
this?
thing that I would say is that because of the way that politics has shifted to the right considerably with the Truss versus Sunak debate, these two they were both candidates who were supported Brexit. Well, Truss didn't, but she does now. And I think that we believe that Rishi Sunak was towards the left of the Conservative Party. I don't think there is a left of the Conservative Party anymore. And so I think that Sunak is further to the right than what is being perceived. And so I don't believe he's going to be this sort of compromised centrist figure that maybe Starmer's like. I think
Maybe
he
just
will-
the contrast with Truss was.
Yes, yeah. That's because Truss was pandering so far to the right.
Daisy?
I was just going to say, yeah, potentially he feels more left wing because the comparison
Yeah.
is so right wing. Like the reason why, I mean, obviously this is across the other side of the pond, but people say that in America there is no left wing candidate. It's just that your centre right candidate feels left wing because Trump was so right wing. It's a similar kind of thing. Can you have a centre left conservative when a majority in the last 6 months of their like policies and their ministers have been so far right, you know, not far right, but further along the spectrum.
Yeah,
if
obviously
you-
not far right.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I think that the difference is that like Sunak is grounded in truth and facts,
Yeah.
whereas Truss isn't. So economically, if they were both given a good economy, I think they would take very similar decisions in terms of how to grow that economy and what they would do. But I think
No
Sunak,
tax, no public spending.
yeah, Sunak looks at facts and like actually,
He's a pragmatist.
yeah, no, but yeah. But it's more he believes in the truth, you know. Whereas
Yeah.
I think Truss believes in fantasy to an extent, you know,
Mm.
that she can see a reality before her and sort of take plans that are so like far from what is needed at that time. Whereas I think Sunak would want to do that, but it just knows that he has to take certain steps to do that. So they're not more or less right wing; it's just more or less credible to an extent.
I just want to say, do you guys, just as the last sort of point before we end up, because we've been going for quite a while with the other interviews as well, do you see a path back for the Conservatives before the next election?
I think they'll close. I think it's inevitable that they are going to close the gap. But I think they still have to do they've got some very difficult choices to make on the economy, and it will put a lot of pain on a lot of people. And I think they will still be blamed for that.
12 years, 14 years by the end of this parliament, Fred, re-elected?
I'd say not. I'd say hung parliament maybe.
Yeah, well, okay, predictions, perfect. Fred,
yeah.
on parliament?
Hung parliament, yeah.
Daisy?
I would say maybe a slim Labour majority, rather than a hung parliament. Potentially a hung parliament, but I want to say slim Labour majority in that sense. I think they will recover quite a bit over the next 2 years because Rishi Sunak is quite a sensible economist, but also already, no matter what choices Rishi Sunak makes, it's not going to stop the cost of living crisis this winter. That is an inevitable fact of life that's going to happen, and no matter what decisions he makes, it's going to reflect badly on a prime minister. People will automatically associate their hardship that they experience with
crisis
the
chancellor, not the
government.
crisis
Yeah,
PM.
exactly. So it's not really stacked up in his favour, I would say, at current. So I would say, you know, he's still going to have negative reflections. It's easy for us to look at it now and be like, well, he could have this amazing 2 years and completely close the gap and potentially get re-elected. But I think the facts of the matter are he's got at least 6 months of slightly negative outlook from the public.
I do think our experience, especially we're all fairly young, as the same as what Ben mentioned earlier, is that our experience has been the Conservatives just keep winning, and Labour do not want to rejoice this to any extent because they've been hit back so many times. And yeah, 14 years. Ben, prediction finally?
Yeah, probably Labour majority of around 25. I think small. But what I'd be really interested to see is if Sunak keeps the leadership and if he's leader of the opposition.
If he loses by just 25.
Yeah, I think that would.
That would be a good job, 25.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's damaged.
Good job for Sunak. If it's
I,
just
I
25.
think
Yeah.
Sunak, if he gets, I think he will do a good job in terms of like where he's at and where he's going to get to. I think he'll be able to do like go from what is it 20, 25 now to potentially 33, 35.
So you're predicting Sunak to run in 2029 for the Conservatives?
And,
That's quite a prediction.
I mean, he's very young.
Yeah,
He's
He's
very
got-
yeah,
he's got
he's
a lot of
young.
time.
I-
Party
yeah.
is.
I think his main focus right now is damage limitation,
Yeah.
and I think if he
Yeah.
can prove that he's achieved that, then
It
he
would be
might-
unfair for him to get such a
I mean,
raise. Well,
yeah.
you know,
It's not about
yeah,
fairness.
it's
though.
not about fairness. Yeah,
Like
I
just
realise.
I think as well, when you do get to the 2024 election, you have to remember people will probably have forgotten about everything that's happened, but Labour's not going to let it lie.
Just
Like
trust who?
when it gets to the campaigning, I think Labour won't just focus on what's happened 6 months prior to that election date. They will also focus on everything that's happened in the last 14 years, namely how everything that's happened in the last year or so.
Perfect. Well, thanks to the three of you. Thanks to the team that's helped put this together. And we hope you've enjoyed the podcast.